I told you there would be a moment. Well, guess what? The moment's here. The fight is coming. Let's go!
Boxing King Media in association with Box Road, Dominic, Ingle out here in the Sheffield. Dom, just seen you with Kell Brook a moment ago, so I think the fans will appreciate an update from Kell Brook. He looks like he's happy. He's still got a nice tan. He's been away by the looks of it.
Yeah, he's obviously got a villa in Fortaventura. He's been out there for I think the last 6 weeks, getting himself away from the media and stuff and tidying up his act. He's been training every day. We've got a gym out there, Bailey's Gym, Fortaventura. And yeah, he's come back in a good state. He came in the other day, did some training, did a bit of sparring, a bit of pad work. He's been doing a bit of running. We've all just been out for a coffee this morning, the old team. Greg Marriott, the nutritionist, Kid Galahad, me. We've had a laugh, we've had listened to some music, we've had a coffee. We've had a chat about his situation, and he's having some health checks done to see where he is. And who knows, he says he's got a couple of things in the pipeline. We've just been sat in the car there as you've pulled up, another project, not to do with him having a fight, but boxing related, round about mental health. I think somebody wants to do a documentary with him and whatever. So there's lots of things going on, and it'll all tie in to this situation. Obviously we're talking about the fight with Conor Benn and Manny Pacquiao, and now this situation with Conor Benn appearing to be cleared, which doesn't seem to be the case really. It's still, the waters are still getting muddied, and there's a lot of confusion out there, and it's an interesting situation. Let's leave it at that.
With regards to Kell, first thing I noticed was he looks like he's not overweight. He looks like he's in pretty good shape for somebody who's not training for a fight. So we're not ruling that out because the fans are intrigued.
He's talking about a fight. But like I said, he's been out a year, and it's not probably been the best year of his life either. So we've, like I said today, he's been for some medical checks. He'll get his report in a couple of days' time. He'll have a look through that and see where he is. And he has been training, and we'll see where he is. He's going to come in the gym. He's going to get back into his training. And I don't really talk to him about fights. Like I said to him a long time ago, the only fight I'd be interested in him doing after the Conor fight was Conor Benn, and obviously then all the Conor Benn situation blew up. And I think they have mentioned Pac-Man, but now they're talking about Pac-Man and Conor Benn. Kell will always get offers, because let's be honest, realistically, what is happening in British boxing today, there's no fantastic fights to look forward to. You've got Anthony Joshua, fair enough. The big news of late was Tommy Fury against Jake Paul. A massive event in the UAE. And, over two nobodies, really, and that's what it were. But it generated a lot of interest. All the big boxing stores rolled up and paid homage to it, and you just think to yourself that the tides kind of changing now, where these YouTubers and these kids are getting switched on, and they're kind of taking over from where the traditional boxing promoters been operating. It's like, we're getting to that new generation again, aren't we? Not only are we getting to, we're supposed to have these next gen of fighters, which we haven't got. We're getting fighters now, YouTube fighters, celebrities, bits of stars, TikTokers, all fighting each other, and it's creating massive interest. So it does make you wonder where, the future of boxing is actually going.
I'll start off with the influencer scene. It's interesting you say that. I went to Atif Shafiq's gym last night, at the Unity Boxing Centre. I was amazed how many kids he had in there. There's like 30, 40 kids in there, full of parents. There's no space to move. And I was speaking to him about it, and he reckons there's a good chance it's on the back end of Jake Paul, Tommy Fury, because all the families, the mums watched it because of Tommy, the kids watched it because of Jake Paul, and it's kind of inspired just a generation of kids that want to box.
Well, that's what it's about, that you've got to be inspired. Whether back in the day it was the likes of Nazim Hamid, or it was, Claude Van Damme, or, Bruce Lee. These were the influences of kids years ago. If you talk to people like Kell Brook and Naz, the martial artists and those kind of popular films and Rocky films, Sylvester Stallone, they were the ones who were motivating kids to be actual boxers. It's no surprise that now the gyms are getting packed out, because YouTube is the format that all the kids watch. It's a massive market. The next day after that fight, you hear people, talking about Tommy Fury and Jake Paul in the same breath as Anthony Joshua and all the big fighters, proper boxers. You know, it's what gets people talking. You know, and people say it's wrong for boxing, but it's entertainment. And if people want to spend their £5 or £7.50 or whatever it is, buying YouTube or buying a ticket to watch these events or whatever, well, it's their money. You know, they make the choice. You can't be told, you know, who you want to be entertained by. You find your own entertainment and what appeals to you. So it's going to be interesting to see. And I've said, and I'll say it again, the next, you know, we're in March now, the next 10 months of 2023 are going to be very interesting because, you know, people like Ben Shalom and Eddie Earn, they've got to start pulling their fingers out and actually start dragging something up what's worth watching, because you've got the two big channels and two big promoters there, and it's like these, it seems, you know, my perception is that these YouTubers are outdoing them, you know, and like if you think reportedly that Tommy Fury got 5 or 6 million quid for that fight, it's like, it's more than most, well, it's more than some champions earn in a lifetime of boxing. So, you know, and he's a novice. So they're doing something right on the promotion front, and you know, it's you can't be sat in the traditional mould for too long. You know, going down the same format of boxing it's been presented. You know, Eddie has done a great job over the last 10 years, but it just seems that these promoters now are taking the foot off the gas, and they're not kind of moving with the times. You know, you've got to know what's coming down the line 6 months before it happens, and it seems like everybody's kind of resting on the laurels. You know, the money's coming in, it's making people lazy.
775,000 people bought that pay-per-view, which obviously you've been around the game a long time. That's a big number, isn't it?
It's a big number. I think they used to say anything over 500,000 is good numbers. So, you know, and the price was how much?
I think it was 20 plus hours over there, so I'm not sure. I'm guessing around £20.
Yeah, a lot of money. So it's generated a lot of money, and it's in a big country where it's got a lot of money. You know, Jake Paul was supposed to get 15, 16 million. It's ridiculous, but at least, you know, they're getting the money. The people who are generating it, you know, obviously in past times, you know, the promoters are taking a big wedge out of the purses and everybody's getting paid peanuts. But, you know, what's happening now is people are finding a way to circumvent it, these YouTubers, and put the money straight in their own pocket. And fair play, fantastic marketing by Jake Paul, even to the point where let's do an all or nothing, winner takes all kind of challenge. And, you know, it just gets people talking. It creates interest, and that's what it's about, creating interest. And that's what they've certainly done.
I was going to ask you about the fight. I don't know if you watched it, but I think we spoke a few weeks before, and I think you said Jake Paul might edge the fight, and it was a close fight, you know, especially with the knockdown towards the end, and Tommy won by split decision. Credit to them for getting paid millions for an 8-rounder.
Boxing's about getting paid money, and that's what it is. And you know, I actually thought Jake Paul might edge it, but Tommy Fury used his brain. He hit and held. He did all the tricks in the book. You know, he did a bit of a Tyson. He nullified a lot of what Jake Paul was doing. Obviously, he got knocked down, and that's where, you know, the power I always thought was going to be with Jake Paul. But looking back, you know, I'm not saying it was all set up for Tommy to win, but it was kind of stacked in his favour. And I think they both came out with a bit of credibility. Jake Paul for going in against a proper fighter, so to speak, and you know, Tommy going in with somebody who a lot of people actually thought were going to beat him, and I think at the end he was very emotional in what he'd done, and you know, fair play, he took his chance, and it paid off. It'll be interesting to see where it all goes from now. You know, they're talking about the KSIs and all the other fighters coming into it, and who knows, even Floyd Mayweather might get in the mix after, you know, his poor showing in London, where fans never really turned out for it. So I would imagine between themselves they're gonna throw it all together and come up with something, because that's how it works.
Definitely. I think as an outsider just watching it, it is interesting to see the amount of eyes that it's bringing, and just the fact that as long as it's bringing kids through the door, and hopefully you might find some champions. And moving on, Dom, let's talk about Conor Benn. About a week or so ago, he put out some statements on Twitter, but that's pretty much all news now, where, you know, he put out a long statement following the WBC clearing him. But last night we obviously saw him on Piers Morgan. First of all, did you watch the show?
Yeah, I did actually watch it. And I wouldn't have normally watched it, but I just think the worst thing you can do with boxers who don't know how to talk like him, it's the worst thing. You put somebody like Floyd Mayweather in front of it, he can talk, he knows how to do it. But it just seemed to me that Conor just dug himself into a bigger hole. And I actually questioned myself and thought, well, why would you put yourself in that position? Because all you're doing there is put yourself back in the firing line. And there was a lot of virtue signalling going off with him. You know, I'm 27, and why would I do this? You know, my family, my honour. That's actually got nothing to do with whether he'd take drugs or not. You know, and Piers kept saying to him, well, you've got the facts, just present the facts. You know, you've been spouting off about this dossier of information what will clear your name, but you won't actually give it, you know, to somebody who can do something about it. And that was the thread through the entire show. Well, if you think you can prove your innocence, well, prove it. And he kind of turned it down at every opportunity. It seemed like he was trying to, you know, change public opinion so that when he does fight, people are going to come out and watch him. And I just think now, the more he goes on with the PR he's doing and the route that he's taking, all he's actually doing is making himself look even worse and exposing himself. And, you know, why did he do that show? He probably did it because he got paid a shitload of money. And he'll need it because the legal expenses he'll be paying out to these people to clear him, it's a waste of money. Because they can present all the information they want. Now they're talking about the lab procedure being wrong, or, you know, it's just unhappy. It does happen very rarely, but not twice. And it's everybody. It seems like it's everybody else's fault apart from his. And even if he didn't know, you know, he's not going to admit it. It'd probably just been better off saying, well, look, I've never taken anything, but I'll accept what the results are. It's the same for everybody else, you know. The thing is you just don't know whether he's going to get a 2-year ban or a 4-year ban. You know, off UCAD. But they've gone down the WBC route, all that about the eggs, and then he said he didn't say it was the eggs excuse. It's like, it's just muddying the waters. It's still confusing. You know what I mean? And it just seems to me that they're trying to get him cleared so they can just sling him in a big fight and generate a lot of money. That's what it seems like to me. They're doing it at all costs. But unfortunately, the longer it goes on, more money's getting wasted on legal stuff. They're going to sue the board, you know.
I'm going to come back to all that, Dom.
Yeah.
One of the couple of things I want to raise and to see if you can give us any expert opinion from your past experiences, because one of the things I've read is that, you know, Conor's legal team have said that the sample, obviously I'm not sure which, it possibly was the first one, the WBC sample, that it was tested 3 times, and I believe it was on the 4th or possibly the 3rd time that they found trace elements of that drug. Is it normal for you know, VADA to test the same tube?
Well,
how do we know that?
Let's look at it this way. If you test a sample and there's nothing in it the first time, why on earth would you test it again in the 2nd time or the 3rd time? Do you understand? You'd only do that as if somebody gave you some inside information and said, we know for a fact Conor Benn has been taking this particular substance. Find that substance in his urine. You might go through the test 2 or 3 times. But if it came through clean the first time, why on earth would you test it again? You wouldn't. If it goes through the first time, you fail. Of course, you're going to check it again just to make sure, to confirm the result. That's why you have an A and a B sample. They split the sample into 2. They test the A sample. And when you're in the room when you have your drug test, they split the sample in front of you into 2 jars, A and B. And they send them both off, and they test the A sample and they save the B sample. So if anything comes in your A sample, they test your B sample for confirmation. If it doesn't come up in your B sample, you're off the hook. If it comes up in your B sample, you're guilty. So if you do an A sample test and it's clear, and it comes through clear, why would the drug testers or the company do it again? Because it's clear. They don't need to. So unless they got the calibrations wrong on the testing or whatever, who knows? Maybe it weren't calibrated, I don't know. But it don't really make any difference. And then didn't he say something like there was nobody there present?
That's the other part. But, you know, just finishing on that, would it be normal, and would that not make the test void if they've tested it 3 times? Because, you know, could that be tampering?
But who's saying it's been tested 3 times? It's like he's got this information.
Because he said that in his report. Surely it must be documented somewhere.
Well, not necessarily. You know, he said that he had 30 eggs, and then he said he didn't have 30 eggs. You know, from my understanding is, he turned around and said that the WBC said, oh, it was probably the eggs. It was in the eggs. You never came up with that, you know. That reason. So I don't know what the normal procedure is for how many times they test a sample. All I know is if your sample fails, they retest your B if you want. And this is for athletes all over the world and for everybody. And you know, Piers Morgan asked the question, well, why would they single you out? What's the agenda? There's no agenda. They ain't got an agenda. You know, they're just there to do a test. Just like the people who come to collect your sample. They're not trying to catch you out. They're just paid to collect a sample. The laboratories aren't paid to catch anybody out. They're just there to do a test on it. The ones you have to answer to is the organisation which is UCAD in England anyway. That's the panel of, you know, professional people, you know, from judges, you know, barristers, certain legal people. That's what they're made up of. Who make a decision. So, you know, why would they single out Conor Benn? It doesn't make sense. It just, you know, like I said all along, Eddie and the team and Connor's whatever, they're just trying to muddy the waters, and they can muddy it as long as they want. But eventually, it won't go anywhere until Conor Benn actually has to go in front of the board or UCAD and say, this is the information. And I think he said on Piers Morgan, well, if they had the information, they won't claim me anyway. And no, they probably wouldn't, because the rule is this. If your food's contaminated, it's actually your responsibility to test all the food that you actually eat. And you think, well, that's ridiculous. Yeah, it is hard. You know, I've never done it with any of my fighters, because you just don't expect food to be contaminated, maybe supplements. And what you're actually supposed to do every meal that you have is actually take a sample of it, put it in a bag and freeze it. And if you fail a test, you can provide samples of all the food that you've eaten, and they will test that food. If you think your food's been contaminated, and they will test the food if you've got samples of it.
Just going back to that second test, and I know you've told me in the past, like, again, I'm no expert, but you told me that when you do the B sample test, somebody has to be there from either, yeah, there has to be Conor or somebody from his team has to be there, and I'm pretty sure the report suggested that his legal team or advisor was on his way to the lab, but they tested the B sample without him being present.
No, all right, then let's go break that down again then. So when you get the option of having your B sample tested, as far as I know with the UCAD and the Boxing Board of Control, you can have your B sample tested for maybe, you have to pay for the second test. Yeah, and it might be between £600 and £800, I think, from what I remember. And then you are given the option of whether you want to attend, or your legal representation wants to attend, or somebody to represent you. And you say, right, okay, I want my B sample testing, and I'm going to send this person, or I'm going to turn up in person. What they do then is, they give you a time. Yeah? So they'll say 10 o'clock, right? That's the time we are doing this test. Make sure you are here for when we do it, because that won't be the only test that day. They've got machines they've got to run it through. Everything will be on a timer, so they'll have to schedule everything. So how convenient that the person who was going for if you were going to go for a really, you know, a life-changing event, something very, very important, you wouldn't even leave it to a point where you're going to be late. You'd probably stay the night before around from the place where you've got to be, just so you don't miss it. That's what I would do. I'd be in a hotel around the corner from where they're doing the testing, so I could get up the next morning, get in a taxi in 5 minutes and get to where I need to be. I would not be late for that. I would not be late for that event. So realistically, yeah, they might have tested it without anybody being there, purely because the person wasn't there on time for when the test was there to be conducted, and they're not going to wait for anybody. Do you understand? And that's as simple as that. So that's where that'll be. But, you know, again, probably twisting the information. I'm only, you know, making an assumption here. Probably twisting the information. Oh, they tested it when there was nobody present. Yeah, because you were probably given a time and you were late. That's what it'll be.
And this kind of leads me on to what Victor Conte tweeted yesterday. I know he's been very vocal about this on Twitter. Victor Conte, again, if nobody knows, he served prison time for supplying athletes with performance-enhancing drugs a few years ago.
Balco.
Okay, I don't know what that is, but he basically said he expecting boxing to believe Conor tested for clomiphene twice, 5 weeks apart, and the lab made errors both times. That's what he said. Yeah,
and that's a you know, a rational summary of it. Yeah, why would it be? Why on his sample of all the thousands of tests that they do? You know, Victor Conte's, you know, obviously knows about doping. He was on a big program back in the, you know, the 2000s. You know, top level athletes, Marion Jones, Dwayne Chambers, all these top athletes were, you know, and also let's not forget Shane Mosley against De La Hoya. I always remember watching that fight and thinking, blooming heck, Shane Mosley never stops. He's got a fantastic engine on him. And then, you know, it came out he was on EPO, testosterone and all sorts. The cream, the clear and EPO. Fantastic mix. So, you know, Victor knows the ins and outs of it all. You I don't agree with a lot of stuff he says, but he knows about that stuff. And it's like, yeah, why would the lab, be faulty twice? It's almost like, asking a kid what they've done and they're blaming everybody else. Oh, it was his fault. He did this, and he's like, instead of just taking the responsibility for himself, it's everybody else's fault. And I just think the agenda at the end of the day is that I think the money invested in, with Matchroom and everybody around him and his name, he needs to have that big fight to recoup all the investment. He needs to get some money. He probably got paid a good whack off Piers Morgan, and he'll need it, like I said, for his legal team. That'll be costing him a fortune. Wasted money, in my opinion, because he's not going to get cleared properly. He's not going to get cleared properly by UCAD. They can only limit the damage legal teams, really, if you look through all the reports. So, it'll be interesting in the next couple of weeks or months where it goes, this, and if he does manage to fight somewhere where, the Board of Control can't outlaw him or the other organisations, where he's going to fight and who's he going to fight and how much he's going to make and who's going to fight him with the tarnished name.
There was a mention of the British Boxing Board in a Piers Morgan quite, he was quite pressing with regards to the Boxing Board seeing this 270-page report, and I think Conor quoted as saying that, there's no point me showing it to them because it won't prove me innocent anyway. And then he further on said that the board had filed 7 charges against him, 2 of which were one's wanting the fight to go ahead, and the second one was not letting Chris Eubank Jr. know about the failed test. What do you make of that?
Well, you as an athlete, you have to make the Board of Control aware of anything, a medical condition, if you've been knocked out in sparring, if you've had any medication, not banned medication, but any medication, or you've got any illness. There's fighters I've had who end up being diagnosed with epilepsy, or they've had a query on the brain scan. You've got to give all this kind of medical information to the board, and if you don't, it's misconduct because it's all in the rules and regulations. So, not surprised, he's failed a drug test, and obviously if it was a UCAD one, they would have informed the board, but this was a one by VADA, but he was still a British Board of Control fighter. So, but then you would think that, with Eddie being the promoter, he'd be up on a misconduct charge then because, he should have informed the board. It's not one rule for, if you're a British Boxing Board of Control licence holder, we're all in the same boat. Managers, boxers, promoters, you have to inform them. So, I'm not surprised upon a misconduct. And I've been upon misconducts loads of times, from shouting in the corner and, not doing as I'm told and objecting to certain things. Loads of times. I've probably been upon misconduct 4 or 5 times. I had fines of thousands of pounds. But I didn't chuck in my licence. I got my wrist slapped, I had to pay money, and I carried on. So, if he wants to box in Britain again, he's got to face the Board of Control. And if they're not going to clear him, at least put the information there, put his case forward. If they don't accept, that's fair enough. That's his explanation. Just because they don't accept it doesn't mean it didn't happen that way. It's just that they found it not acceptable. But some people might read that because it'll be available to everybody. When he puts that to the Board of Control, it will go on UCAD's website, and the general public can see it. And you can make your own mind up about it.
One of the things he said about that, because again, Piers Morgan was pressing on him showing that report to the Boxing Board, and the 2 things he said was he won't do it because of his pride, and he has no plans of fighting in Britain anytime soon. So if you think of it from his point of view, he feels that the board and everyone's kind of being against him. Do you think that's good enough reason just to avoid showing that report to them?
Every fighter or, athlete who fails a drug test thinks everybody's against him. It's like, well, yeah, it's understandable because you failed a drug test. That's what you are. That's what happens unless you can give a good reason. And they'll accept a good reason. You'll still get a slap on the wrist for 6 months, even if they accept your good reason. There's loads of cases on the UCAD website, old cases, retrospective cases, everything. There's loads, and it gives you the full breakdown, the procedure. He
also said, Dom, on the back end of that, he says, I don't know why, but they've got it in for me. There's a vendetta against me. And then he said, I've been proven innocent. And then Piers Morgan replied to that saying, no, you haven't been proven innocent. They said there was no conclusive evidence.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's a good thing to say they've got a vendetta. Why? What? He's only been good for British boxing, realistically, till this point. So why would they have anything against him? For what reason? It's not, you could see in this position, whether I should say any of this or not, you could say, well, is it because I'm black? Is it, or am I gay? Or am I transgender? Or there's whatever. What reason? You're just a boxer like everybody else. Why would anybody particularly have it in for you? For what reason? It'd be like Billy Joe saying they got it in for me because I'm a traveller. It's like, it's not the reason why. Nobody's got it in for you.
Could it be because of the history with the dad?
Well, there was a fantastic British boxer and everybody loved him. All right, he might have given his licence up, but the board don't care. They're not going to, we're going to have this vendetta against Conor Benn because his dad gave him his licence. It doesn't matter to them. Because the years that Nigel Benn was boxing, he was a great advocate for the game, tremendous fights, he generated a lot of money for the Boxing Board of Control. If you disagree with the decision, I've disagreed with loads of their decisions, what they've had against me. They've had me bent over barrel sometimes, but I wanted to be in the boxing scene, and I wanted to train fighters, and I wanted to have a British Boxing Control licence. And just because I didn't like what they did or whatever, I had to put up with it because that's the rules. I didn't particularly even agree with the rules. But in order for me to operate training fighters, that's the organisation I'm in. And whether I like the rules or I don't like them rules, in fact, I'm going to do my own thing. Well, you can't go and do your own thing. I could go to America and do it, but I live in England. So just because I disagree with the rules doesn't mean that their rules are wrong. I think they do a lot of things wrong, the Board of Control. But I've had a licence for 30 odd years. So, and I've never given up my licence. They've tried to take my licence off me a few times. But I've still paid my fee every year and had to pay fines and do courses just to maintain my licence to make a living. And that's what he's having to do as a boxer. He's having to follow the rules. But what he's not doing, what he's trying to do is get around the rules. And, you'll get around them a little bit. Like I got around a few rules and regulations with a bit of a slap on the hand. And then sometimes I got massive fines. And I had to pay it. And I didn't say, I'm not paying that because I don't agree with it. Because I'd just been cutting off my own nose to spite my face. I had to pay the fines to carry on working.
And just wrapping up a couple of things, the public perception. We saw a lot of boxers, people in boxing that have been tweeting last night. There's a couple that I've picked out. Michael Conlon put something out saying, just watch the interview, so many questions, still he failed 2 tests, both contaminated, but his pride is stopping the evidence, ? And then he said, if anything, I'm more convinced he cheated. Either way, if a banned substance is in your system, you should be banned. Sonny Edwards has had a few things to say as well. So the public perception from the boxing, from what I saw, was pretty negative. Where do you stand with it from what you know so far?
I don't think it really matters where I stand. All I'll say is this. Dillian Whyte, 2 years, he did it. Tyson Fury, 2 years, he did it. Kid Gallagher, 2 years. He did it, meaning they did the time, they did the 2 years. There'll be other fighters who've done the time and come back, just and big fighters, and got on with their careers. It's one of those things in the game of boxing, whether it's supplements, intentional, whatever it is, there's a procedure. And Tyson Fury had to go through it. Kid Gallagher went through it. Dillian Whyte went through it. There'll be others, too many to mention probably. And then there's ones who try and get around it. Canelo, 6 months for clenbuterol. It should have been 2 years. He got around it because he's worth millions. To promote, he's worth millions. Conor Benn is probably worth a few quid if you can promote him. So, to be honest, it's all a bit of a storm in a teacup. Clomifene for it is probably a waste of time. It's a masking agent, meaning you've been using testosterone. That's what it means. That's why you're going to get done for it. Because as an item on its own, it's probably not even a performance enhancer, even though people like to say, it gives you massive benefits. I don't particularly think it does from what I've read. But the thing is with Conor Benn is he's in the firing line and he's trying to get out of it. And that's the game he's in. So if you can't prove yourself innocent, you're going to have to take the slap on the wrist, take the ban, do what you need to do. Because the longer this goes on, all it does is just discredits everybody who's trying to clear his name. Because anybody looking from the outside, looking at this, as innocent bystanders, will think, it's just a bit all wrong, this. Do you understand? He's got the information to pass on, to clear his name, he don't want to do it. Well, fair enough then, you just have to have the ban then, aren't you? That's it. But let's just see where this is in 3... I can remember telling you 5 or 6 months ago what's going to happen. They're going to muddy the waters, they're going to make every excuse in the book, they're trying to pass it to the WBC to clear him, which they did. And he's still trying to contest and clear his name, and he still hasn't boxed. So let's see. If Eddie's going to stick his neck on the chopping block and make a fight. And let's see how that goes down. That's the only way we're going to tell. See what the public think. and see what fight's going to come, see people support it. But, you know, going down this route of a conspiracy theory that everybody doesn't like him and they've got it in for him, it's just wrong, and it's not actually how it is. So let's just see.
And the last thing I want to ask you is the emotional side of it. You know, you mentioned that he's been feeling suicidal. He feels shame in leaving the house. You know, quite deep words them, and he feels like it's been like a witch hunt against him, and he's not seen that with any other athlete. Obviously, you've been around fighters who've faced similar sort of issues. Can we look back and just imagine, because he's 26 and that ain't going to be easy going through all the shit he's going through, and let's just say if he is innocent.
Well, Kid Gallagher was about 24 when he failed a drug test, yeah, and it wasn't public knowledge till about 8 months after, because it was all kept under wraps. It didn't get publicised because we had a legal team working it out, dealing with UCAD, dealing with the board in the proper procedural way. Do you understand? That's what we did. And then, you know, they had a hearing, the information was presented, and he got found, you know, that they didn't believe his reasons, so he got a ban. And then we managed to get it reduced by 6 months. But there was none of all this, what's going on now. It was, well, you know, that's what we're presenting. And he wasn't accepted. He did his ban. He carried on. He got drug tested multiple times and still became world champion. You could turn around and say, well, you know, for whatever reason, whatever is in his system didn't make him a better fighter, because he still went on to become a world champion and still, you know, went on for 6 or 7 years. He took his ban like you do. That's what you do. So, you know, that's where we are, and like I say, it's a strange situation. Take your slap on the wrist. That's what you need to do.
You've seen a lot of comments in the interviews that you do. People.
Also, we didn't even finish that, did we? About where mental health wise. So if he's so 27, yeah. Well, Gallagher was 24, younger age, not in a great position. You know, as Conor Benn, you know, famous farmer and all this. Yeah, maybe that makes the pressure even worse. But he came from the famous Ingle gym, and the accusations around that. My father was still alive at the time, couldn't understand what was going on. So it kind of cast a shadow over everybody. And I can remember UCAD coming in this gym with 4 or 5 people on a regular basis, testing all the boxes, because somebody had been sending in information saying, oh, they're all on drugs in that gym. Well, yeah, come on then, come and test them all. And you know what? Nobody else failed a drug test. But they were coming in 4s and 5s. I can remember one day coming in, there were 5 UCAD DCOs. What's up, lads? Oh, we come to test. I went, who've you got? I went, well, we've got Kell Brook, we've got Lee Wood, we've got Jordan Gill, Kid Galahad. Reeled off about Bob Adjusef. Reeled off about, yeah, we'll have all them. And yeah, no problem. Then go on, then test them. They tested them all. Then they came again maybe another 12 weeks after, and another 12 weeks after, for about a year, testing all the fighters. You know what they found? They found nothing. But that's what happens. So it casts accusations on people. Do you understand? And all of a sudden, oh yeah, they're all taking drugs. Well, fair enough. Well, come down and test. It's not an issue. Walk in this gym any time. They're always made welcome, the DCOs who collect the samples. Never any hassles in here. Kell Brook, yeah, sometimes he might be at his house. Yeah, come down, Kell, they're here for you. Yeah, come down and have his test done. No problem. Kell Brook's never failed a drug test. Been an athlete all these years, done it properly. So, you know, there's nothing to hide. So, talking about suicide and everything else, well, you'd think for a boxer, like the way he talks, I've seen it. Kell Brook's been through depression. I sat in the car before and I said, have you ever got to that place, you know, topping yourself? He went, when you're under the influence of, you know, drugs or whatever, say drinking or whatever, you have some black moments. But we're assuming that Conor Benn's never been in that position, intoxicated or whatever. We're talking just purely on, you know, oh, this is what's going off. I said, so to Kell, when you've been in a sober position and stuff's going off, have you ever thought about topping yourself? No, not really. It's just something you've got to deal with. So, you know, I don't quite buy that, you know, that would be enough to send you over the edge, because fighters have got a different mentality. You've got to be a kind of part psychopath. You're going to bash.
What about all, you know, all the tweets? And because it can't be easy, like, you know, the public being against you.
With that is just delete Twitter, don't read it. Because what doesn't get in your mind doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, you know, are saying. It doesn't. What matters is what your family think, because that's who you're living with, right? It doesn't matter what fans are saying about you. You can't change or control what people say about you. You can't do that. People talk even before social media. They all talk amongst themselves, and you know it might be a laugh and a joke, and people just, you know, can be malicious. But these is where. It's just not to be bothered, just not even read it. You know, it's like people say to me, somebody said this, oh, I don't care, so what? And well, this fella, I don't know who he is. It'd be different if my kids said they didn't like me or that, I weren't a good dad or something like that, and people who matter to me. But fans are fans. They're paying there for entertainment. And if they want to have a discussion about what you are and what you're not, then next time they'll either pay for you or they won't. So why get et up about it realistically? Do you understand? They're not his family. Fans aren't your family. Yeah, they pay for your fights if they want to watch it. And if you box crap, they might slag you off. That's the fickleness of fans. And I like to quote this one because we're coming up to Easter. My father used to say, the crowds that welcomed Jesus into Jerusalem a week, 7 days before, then it was the same crowd had him hung on a cross. Do you understand? So he came into Jerusalem, they were throwing palm leaves down, cheering him on. 7 days later, when Pontius Pilate had him up in front of everybody, who shall we kill, who shall we crucify, Barabbas or Jesus? And they went, stick Jesus on the cross. And that's the fickleness of fans and people. That's human nature, as he would say. So why would you be bothered? Yeah? Why would you be bothered?
That's a brilliant quote, Dom. I'm going to leave it on that. I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
I told you there would be a moment. Well, guess what? The moment's here. The fight is coming. Let's go!